Welcome to our conference. Hello. Feel free to take a seat. You don't need to be standing. There's some open seats for everyone.
Oh, you know what? I went into your Whole Foods.
Oh, did you?
A week ago, Tuesday. And they were having a little meeting and you weren't there. I was there about 11:30.
That early?
And they were at lunch or something.
We will now be beginning, so please feel free to get some drinks, but if you can do that quietly, it will be much appreciated. Thank you. Fellow students, Synapse members, friends, and guests. On behalf of the Synapse Core Committee, it is with great pleasure that I welcome you to the first Alumni Brain Conference here at Stanford University. Stanford Synapse, with the co-sponsorship of Parking and Transportation Services, has been working towards this conference to create awareness towards traumatic brain injury and bike safety. Now, I have the great honor of inviting our first speaker, President Mark Tessier-Levy, to deliver opening remarks. President Tessier-Levy is a pioneering neuroscientist, biotechnology executive, and academic leader. Dr. Tessier-Levy and his colleagues work towards identifying molecules that direct the formation of connections among nerve cells to establish circuits in the developing brain and spinal cord. His contributions have been recognized by numerous prizes and honors, including his election as a member of the National Academy of Sciences and the National Academy of Medicine, and the Fellow of the Royal Societies of the UK and Canada, among other recognitions. Please join me in welcoming our very accomplished President, Dr. Mark Tessier-Levy.
Thank you very much, Sani, for that kind introduction, and thank you for the invitation to be here at this very special event. I'd really like to start by thanking the founders and the student leaders of Synapse for creating the organization and for putting together this event. And so I just want to call out the current student leadership of Synapse. That's Michael, Sani, Sophia, Claire, Rena, Alessandra, Tommy, and Isabel, as well as their faculty advisors, liaisons, and alumni. Let's give them all a round of applause. So I wanted to thank them for their vision and the inspiring mission of Synapse, which is to shine a spotlight on the problem of brain injury and really raise awareness of the problem. To provide a support group for people suffering from brain injuries, and also to do outreach to the community and to understand the patient perspective, how it is that we can best assist people who do suffer from brain injury. So again, thank you so much for that mission and for doing all of this important work. I'd just like to take a few minutes really to say a few words. As you heard from Sani, I'm actually card-carrying neuroscientist. Neuroscience is my first love. I work on brain development, brain degeneration, and brain repair. And I thought I'd just share at a very high level a little bit of what's happening on the therapeutic side after someone has a brain injury. What kind of therapeutic interventions are starting to take shape and potentially help patients. As you know, the brain is made up of nerve cells. These are cells that have a cell body, think of it as a little sphere, with a thin extension called an axon. It looks like an electrical cable. It's actually an electrical cable that carries electrical impulses and connects to multiple other nerve cells to form neural circuits that underlie all the functions of the brain. When I move an arm, nerve cells on this side of my brain are firing and sending signals down to the muscle in the arm and vice versa. After a brain injury, what happens there, first of all, there can be immediate damage to nerve cells. Cell bodies can die, the axon can be disconnected. And so that happens often to a limited extent. But we now know that there's then a secondary wave of damage after the initial trauma that actually leads over several hours, in some cases days, to further degeneration of the nerve fibers, which again can disconnect nerve cells from their targets, and death of the nerve cell bodies. If the nerve cell body has died, it can never regenerate or reconnect. We know now, there's more insights have been garnered in the past decade about the links between initial trauma and later degeneration. And we know that there are biochemical pathways that have to be activated by the trauma to cause the degeneration. We have some insights into that, and we already know in animal models that if you block that biochemical pathway, that you can slow or arrest the degeneration after the initial trauma. Work in a number of laboratories, including ours, has identified some entry points. And when we have more entry points and understand the pathway better, we should be able to design therapeutic interventions to block the pathway. So the hope there is that some of the initial damage may be done, but we could potentially intervene to block the next wave of damage that occurs over that secondary period. And there's actually one biochemical target that's been identified that looks very promising if anyone is able to develop a therapeutic to block it, that could potentially be beneficial. The process of going from inside the laboratory to a therapeutic useful in patients is a very long and arduous one, as you all know. It takes many years on average, actually from laboratory discovery to making a therapeutic on average takes 5 years, from having a therapeutic candidate to showing efficacy in patients and being approved by the FDA takes another 8 years, so 13 years on average. Those timelines are getting shorter. Those historical timelines are getting shorter because people have been working hard to try to shorten the timelines. But still, we're looking at the insights that are being garnered today. We can be hopeful that over the next 5, 10, 15 years might actually provide some beneficial therapy. So I just wanted to set expectations here. It's not going to happen tomorrow. But I think we were way more hopeful today than we were, say, 10 years ago. But that's the pace of science. Once there's been the first wave of degeneration and the second, then the nerve cells that remain, it was thought for a long time, would never be able to undergo any kind of repair. In the words of the great Spanish neuroembryologist Santiago Ramon y Cajal, who won the Nobel Prize in 1906 for his work on the nervous system, he declared that in adult nervous system, in the embryo, nerve cells are growing, they're making connections, everything is very plastic. But he claimed, after intense study over a period of several decades, that in adult nervous system, everything is, quote, fixed, immutable, irreversible. Everything is set, nothing can be changed. And that was it was a message that removed all hope of being able to change things. That was the dogma for many years, and it was because at the level of analysis that he could perform, he did not see any evidence of repair. It's only about 30 years ago that the first evidence that there is actually some plasticity that remains in the adult nervous system that can potentially be harnessed was discovered. And that knowledge accelerated. A lot of this work was done in the Bay Area by Michael Merznick at UCSF, by Carl Schatz here at Stanford, by Eric Knudsen here at Stanford. Just last night, the Kavli Foundation, one of the great scientific award foundations that gives major prizes and gateways to the Nobel Prize, held a ceremony for Kavli Prize winners here on the Stanford campus. And two of the people who were honored were Carl Schatz and Mike Merznick. So they're real leaders in the field. What they found is that if you think of a nerve cell and its connections to target cells, that in the adults, that's set.
Nothing can be changed, but we now know that through training, through appropriate activity of the circuits, which you can do by moving limbs, for example, for circuits in the spinal cord, or by other types of exercises in the brain, that you can actually cause some strengthening and rearrangement and plasticity of some of the connections. Very important to know that that's possible. We have a limited understanding of the rules and how we can harness that, but there is clearly the potential to harness that. And very importantly, there's also a growing knowledge of the molecular controls of this process, so that we could potentially access it through therapeutic interventions as opposed to through exercises. So a combination, and always the hope is a combination of exercises and therapy together could give you even more of a boost. And so I think we've gone from a period of pessimism 100 years ago, 30 years ago, to one of, again, of guarded optimism that we know there's plasticity, that we're learning how to harness that plasticity, and that can be beneficial for patients as well. Again, I want to be realistic about the time frames. We're talking about, over the next decade, we can hope to see more progress there. But all of this, I'm a glass half full kind of person, and the glass is definitely half full there, and we need to fill it as rapidly as possible to help patients in need. So I want to leave you with a sense of some of the optimism in the field, but realistic optimism that will take some time and continued investment, but it's happening as we speak. So optimism, yes, it's not going to happen tomorrow, and because of that, we have to really deal with the third prong, and that I know is a big focus of Synapse as well, which is prevention. Even if we had the best therapy in the world, prevention is still better. This is true for any ailment that you might have. Try to prevent it. If you can't, then it's great to have a therapeutic intervention, but whatever the circumstances, prevention is key, and it's especially key where the therapies are not as advanced as we would want them to be. And if I had to drill down on one thing for prevention on this campus, in our campus community, you've guessed it, wear a helmet when riding a bike. Anyone surprised? I was walking here from the quad, and I saw probably a couple dozen bikers, and I'd say at most 20% of the people riding bikes or on their skateboards were wearing helmets. And it's actually very profoundly distressing to me. At the beginning of the year, you can see it's more like 60, 70, even 80% of the students, but it's a very short half-life. Within weeks, people have shed their helmets. Who knows where they go? Please, 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 all of you who are here, wear your helmets. I always wear a helmet. I'm going biking today. At the end of the day, it's a beautiful day. I will be wearing a helmet. Wear a helmet. And also, tell your friends to wear a helmet. And please help us understand for the university leadership, is there something we can do to encourage students to wear their helmets more? Any ideas you have, we really, really welcome. So please come find me, send me an email. If there's, this has to be a group effort for us to make this a reality. So in closing, I just want to thank Synapse again for inviting me. It's a real honor to be here. I'm just so thrilled to see all the people who are interested in this really important problem. I want to thank Synapse for the Synapse leadership for organizing what promises to be a really exciting, instructive, and impactful event. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you very much for doing this. Let's all work together to prevent brain injuries and to help those who have them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, President Tessier-Lavigne. As you said, neuroplasticity gives us hope, but we should also wear our helmets. Before we proceed with our scheduled speakers, I would like to invite my fellow Synapse co-president, Michael Chen, to give some information about Stanford Synapse's mission and a brief background regarding this event. Michael, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Sani, and thank you, President Tessier-Lavigne, for those opening remarks. We're all very inspired by your words, and hopefully we can increase helmet use on campus. And I want to thank all of the attendees today for coming out. I know it's Groundhog Day, which is a very auspicious holiday here in the United States, so thank you for sharing your time with us and for coming out. We really appreciate it. I just wanted to give you a bit of background on Synapse as a whole and how this event came to be. So Synapse was founded in 2015 by Alyssa Totman, Jackie Konopka, they're two medical students at Stanford, in collaboration with undergraduates, including myself, Sophie, and Claire, among others. And the goal of the group is to both serve the patients in our community who have suffered a brain injury, since we found that there was a lack of social support in the general area, and also to serve as a two-way street to also educate students about the patient perspective of living with a brain injury. So Synapse is really a symbiotic relationship, and our goal was to really foster more supportive relationships and also inspire the next generation of leaders in healthcare and medicine. So with that, the story behind the event is last year, actually, almost a year ago, I met Ariadne Scott, who's in the back. Ar, could you wave your hand real quick? Yeah, so she works with bike safety here on campus, and I was fortunate to meet her during a tabling event for Brain Injury Awareness Month last March. And we got talking, and suddenly the idea came up, hey, we should organize an event to increase the number of people who wear helmets on campus, because I learned that only 14% of students, undergraduates, actually wear helmets. And then you walk over to the medical school and you notice, oh, everyone's wearing a helmet. I wonder what I wonder what they've seen that we haven't. So that's really that was the motivation for this event, and we've been planning over the past year. I really want to give a big round of applause for R for making this possible. We really couldn't have done it without her. So thank you to R, thank you to all of our Synapse volunteers, and thank you for coming, everyone. We have a really exciting lineup of speakers coming up and a panel following. And after that, we'll have an activities session where you'll have a chance to feel a real human brain. So please stick around for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Now we can begin with our scheduled keynote speakers. I have the great pleasure of inviting our first speaker and Stanford Synapse advisor, Dr. Gajar, to deliver his talk titled Eye Tracking Detection of Attention, Concussion, and Beyond. Dr. Gajar is a board-certified neurosurgeon, clinical professor of neurosurgery, director of the Stanford Concussion and Brain Performance Center, and president of the Brain Trauma Foundation in New York City and Palo Alto. He completed his MD PhD training at Cornell University Medical College. During his residency at New York Presbyterian Hospital, he invented and patented several neurosurgical devices that are currently used worldwide. After residency, he joined the faculty at the New York Presbyterian Hospital and was a founder of the Brain Trauma Foundation, whose mission is to improve the outcome of patients with traumatic brain injury. He joined the neurosurgery faculty here at Stanford in February 2014. As the director of the Stanford Concussion and Brain Performance Center, Dr. Gajar is conducting groundbreaking concussion and brain injury research and is developing state-of-the-art eye tracking tests, EyeSync. Please welcome Dr. Gajar to the stage.
Okay, well, thanks very much. So I'm a neurosurgeon, and I think from the basic science point of view, we just heard from the president all the remarkable work going on. I just saw Gary Steinberg come in. They're doing remarkable work in stroke with, and I think we should think of the glass as half full, because they've done some stem cell trials that have been very, very positive, and Gary's really been promoting that. We're trying to make that transition from stroke over to traumatic brain injury. So I also want to acknowledge Dr. Viet Nguyen, who's my neurology counterpart at the Concussion and Brain Performance Center. We like to call it the Concussion and Brain Performance Center because we're actually improving people's attention, actually. We're finding a lot of people are disoriented and prone to injury. I'm going to present a little bit of that. But first, the computer. Okay, so I'll get this going. So what I'm going to be talking about is a little bit from a clinical perspective in terms of taking care of severe traumatic brain injury and also concussion. So this is the title of the talk. It's really focused on concussion, but I'm going to start off a little bit with severe traumatic brain injury. You know, when we used to give a talk as neurosurgeons about traumatic brain injury, talk about coma, most people be very awake, and this is back in the 80s and 90s. People were very interested in coma, and we talk about concussion, they all fall asleep. Now it's the reverse. People are very interested in concussion and not very interested in coma. And, when I was a resident, when a person came in from a car accident, a young person came from a car accident, there's a 50-50 chance that that person would make it. Now those odds have dropped down to a 15% mortality, with a dramatic decrease in deaths. Unfortunately, not from any pharmaceuticals, but just from good resuscitation. So a lot of brain injury, you can get a secondary injury if you don't have good blood flow. So a lot of this is resuscitation. And I'll be talking about that a little bit at the beginning about coma and then move on from there. So we have the Stanford Neuroscience Health Center. That's where the neurologists and neurosurgeons and neuroradiologists see patients. That's where we have the clinic for outside patients. I see all the athletes over at the Joe Lacob Sports Medicine over there every afternoon. I see athletes with concussions. And then the trauma center, take call, we see patients with severe traumatic brain injury. So we see the whole gamut from concussion to coma. And what we do in those different, they're very, and a lot of people are trying to lump the two together. They're very different in terms of management. And I'll go a little bit through the coma management first and then tackle the concussion. So we have a Department of Defense funded collaboration here at Stanford called the Brain Trauma Evidence-Based Consortium, BTEC. And BTEC does the national guidelines for severe traumatic brain injury. So if you're in an ambulance, they're using those guidelines. Or if you're in the hospital trauma center, they're using those guidelines. And those guidelines have led to a 45% decrease in deaths. And there's nothing, I like to say there was a drug involved, but it's really about not doing things you shouldn't be doing. So we stopped hyperventilating a lot of the patients. There was a lot of hyperventilation going on. If you hyperventilate somebody, you drive off the carbon dioxide. The blood vessels in the brain shrink, and the pressure goes down. But the problem is the pressure in the brain goes down at the cost of blood flow. And so it's harmful in the long run. So we stopped doing that. We stopped giving steroids, full resuscitation, and we decreased practice variability, and the death rate fell by 45%. So I'm going to leave this up here for a little bit. Let's talk about concussion. Okay, do you want to be that mouse without a helmet? Okay, so I'm gonna push the helmet deal. So helmets are very good for preventing skull fractures and scalp injuries. Okay, so I don't know if a lot of you know Natasha Richardson. She's an actress that died in Canada a few years ago, and she wasn't wearing a helmet skiing, and she hit her head hard on an ice pack. And she was awake at first, and then gradually became more and more sleepy. And then a few hours later, she slipped into coma, and they put her in an ambulance and took her to Montreal. And by the time she got there, her brain was dead. If she had a helmet, she'd be alive and totally normal today. Absolutely. So that's a classic neurosurgical board question of, you get a fracture of the bone on the side of your head, and it cuts a blood vessel, and you get a blood clot that expands on the brain. And so a helmet can prevent that. I'm just showing you a really nasty skull fracture over there that again would have been prevented with a helmet. So helmets are really essential. They're to prevent skull fractures and scalp injuries, really, really essential. That said, they don't prevent concussions. Okay, the reason why they don't prevent concussions is because you don't have an iron neck. If you had an iron neck, the helmet would be 100% protective. The problem is that your neck moves, the head moves, and the brain sloshes around. So this is a sort of classic drawing of the brain movement in the skull as the head moves. And it's really a rotation around the neck that causes the problem. The front part of the brain is farthest away from the rotation. And that's where we get the blood clots from severe traumatic brain injury. When I go to the OR and take out a blood clot, it's in the front, it's not over the back. We never take out blood clots in occipital lobe, it's very rare. So it's a front part of the brain producing this concussion. And as far as research, there's actually an Army lab that's doing research on tethers that will go between the helmet and the torso. And actually, this would be a solution for the NFL. If they had some neck device, and there's a hands device they use in NASCAR racing that basically locks in the head to the torso, and there's no movement, very little brain injury. But of course, you want the quarterback to be able to move his head. So it's an engineering problem, a great engineering problem for Stanford, actually. We should lock about 12 engineers in a room, throw away a key, and tell them, this is the problem. and I bet you they'd solve it in about 2 weeks. So really, this is the solution to concussions. Eventually, it's a neck movement. You got to figure out a way to prevent the neck from moving too fast. It's a certain kind of movement, so woodpeckers don't get concussions. This kind of movement doesn't normally produce concussions. It produces spinal cord injury, but not concussions. This movement, sideways like this, sloshes the brain around. That's where we get tearing of the axons that the president was talking about, and the damage to the nerve cells. If we can prevent that, we can prevent the damage. So, few ideas floating out there, but I'm sure Stanford engineers could come up with a solution in a nanosecond. So let's talk about concussion. The fog of concussion. A lot of the public think that we have diagnostic criteria for concussion. We actually don't. If you had a headache after a force to the head, your physician will tell you had a traumatic brain injury, you have a concussion. Sit in a dark room till the headache goes away. We have a national epidemic of kids sitting in dark rooms, getting depressed, anxious, chronic fatigue, and not the way to go. There are lots of studies. We just published an article showing early exercise promotes recovery. So we need to look at it from a different point of view. There's also a lot of heat in the public. There's the concussion movie. Will Smith came out. The reports on chronic traumatic encephalopathy in football players, and so on. It's really very concerning. And I guess the big question for most families is, should I let my 8-year-old play football? And it's kind of, when I see the athletes here at Stanford for concussions, and I'll just ask the audience, who thinks, what do you think the number one sport for, actually, what's the number one cause of, on campus, what do you think that would be the number one cause for concussions? Bicycling, yes. Wear your helmet. Okay, that's particularly that. Now we'll go to sports. Which sports do you think would be number one? Soccer, rugby? Wrestling. Who said wrestling? There you go. Wrestling's number one. Number one NCAA, number one at Stanford. Wrestling's number one cause of concussion. So it's in every sport. I get it in swimmers, synchronized swimmers, sailors, you name it. Everyone has golfers. So concussions are prevalent in anything you have an interaction with. So there are lots of, right now, the things that are going on in terms of detection, sideline assessment, and clinic assessment. So mouth guards, going to talk a little bit about David Camarillo's work here in engineering with that. There's these little bands that Reebok has, he puts around your head, it turns red or green, forget it, they don't work. The best thing you can do is just look out, spotters, see if somebody's down, they look like they have a concussion, take them out. On the sideline, they use, follow my finger. We use this eye tracking, which I'll talk about. There's cards that you can read, and eventually there'll be blood tests for concussion, but right now we don't have that. In the clinic, we use cognitive tests. We also use eye tracking, use EEG, and of course radiology. Most of the MRIs and CT scans of people with concussions are normal. So this is David Camarillo's lab. He's working on mouth guard accelerometers, which is very promising, and we hope that this kind of accelerometers would let us to say that this person probably had a concussion, take them off the field, and then do tests to determine if they really did have a concussion. There are over 4 million concussions every year. This is the front cover of Time. About 17 kids die every year playing football. The question is it second impact syndrome, which a lot of people think you had a concussion, you go back in, you get another concussion, it's twice as bad. That's true, but a lot of these forces in these plays are very serious and could be just from the force and the genetics of the person. But the main thing that's a problem after concussion is disorientation. And that's what I'm going to get at right now. How do we measure disorientation? What is orientation? How are you oriented? And also, if you look at chronic traumatic encephalopathy, there's grades from 1 to 4. The 1 starts in the prefrontal cortex, where the attention areas are. So it's an indicator of where these things are. So what's attention? Here at Stanford, we should really know what attention is because we've got the top people in the world. And really, at the end of the day, attention is spatial and temporal orientation to content. So the problem is that there's space and time. How many people saw Interstellar, the film? Oh, very good. Okay, so that was a really good film because you're standing in time to understand space. In Interstellar, he was standing in gravity to see time and space. So the problem we have with our brain is it takes time to process information. So you're actually about a quarter of a second behind. So when you see the tennis ball, it's already gone. When you hear me talk and process the word, it's already gone. And so we're actually aware in the past, but we want to play in the present. And the only way you can do that is by being in the future. Kind of weird, okay? Future, present, and past. So to be in the present, you have to predict what's about to happen. And that requires spatial and temporal prediction. So this is where timing becomes very important. And disruption of that can lead to you feeling like you're in a fog, in a daze, out of sync. You know, those are the words that people with concussion use all the time. Or if you have a jet lag, you're tired, and your brain's not synchronizing with the outside world. You want to synchronize with the outside world so you can process content. And so that's what we're interested in measuring in concussion. So here's a tennis player. By the time they see that ball, of course, when you're playing tennis, it's not going 100 miles an hour, but it's going fast. By the time you see it, it's already gone. So you have to swing your racket before the ball gets there, okay? So your brain is always swinging the racket before the information's there so you can process it just in time. So you're in the future to hit the ball in the present, to realize you hit the ball in the past. That's the way it works. Kind of weird, but that's the way it is. So how do you measure it? So you can measure it lots of ways. You can measure it by somebody hitting a tennis ball, for instance, but it take you a long time to measure that. But look at it, we have a system right here that's perfect. It's called foveation. In primates and man, they're the only ones that have smooth pursuit. So you can follow things very smoothly with your eye and follow things. And that whatever you're looking at lands in your fovea, which is if you put your thumb out, you look at your thumbnail, that's what you foveate, what you see. Everything else kind of blurry. And if your thumb goes back and forth, your eye can follow that very, very accurately, back and forth. So I don't know if you remember Jurassic Park with the dinosaurs. Did you see the dinosaurs? They had smooth pursuit. That scared the hell out of everybody. So usually your dog or your cat has saccadic eye movements. They just move like this. They jump. The smooth pursuit is a sign of higher intelligence. So this is a system we can use to measure prediction. So I can give a stimulus that's predictable, like a dot going around a circle, and I can see whether your eye predicts correctly and you follow that well. So that synchronization is a measure of how well you pay attention. So I like to say that they call this visual orientation or synchronization with the outside world. And the outside world could be still, you're still, the outside world moving and you're still, or you're moving with respect to it, or they're both moving together. So you had 4 different conditions with 2 variables. And we measure this with eye sync. Now we get into sort of company. Everyone at Stanford has a conflict, so I got a conflict. I founded this company, so anything I say about it, just realize that I started it. But I want to talk really about synchronization using eye tracking. It's important. So it's important because the attention network is up in the front part of the brain, and that's where we see most of the injury. As I told you, the head moves around the neck, there's a whiplash, and the axons that the president was talking about get stretched and injured. And we lose what we think is the synchronization orientation that's a problem in people. And if you look at it here, the cerebellum, which is my favorite organ, if you look at the timing predictor is a cerebellum. How many neurons in the brain? Synapse people. How many neurons in the brain? Alyssa. How many? 100 billion neurons. It's about 87, but we'll see. 100 billion. Do you know where 80 billion of those brain cells are? Cerebellum. They're the granule cells. And if you look at the anatomy, most of the sensory association areas feed into those granule cells, and then it projects up to the prefrontal cortex and the motor areas. So it's synchronizing your motor functions with incoming sensory information. It's predicting what's about to happen. And we can see where the injury is right along the pathway of where those future fibers are going. And we see this classically in severe traumatic brain injury as well. So these are areas to look for in concussion. So I like to say the future of brain technology is in the eyes. The eyes are a window of the brain. This is the product. You're going to see it set up outside, and you all can take a test. We won't compare you to this Stanford. Oh, how many Stanford students are in here, by the way? Okay, we'll have you guys the reference. We'll see, pick you out. We're thinking of testing the neurosurgery residents with this, but anyway, we'll see. But it comes with a nifty case and all sorts of goodies. But the important thing is, so this is a Gear VR. If you go to Samsung and buy a phone, they'll give you a Gear VR headset. But this has a special headset. It has cameras built into it, and infrared emitters, so it can tell where your eyes are. And in the future, let me do another one. How many people have actually done VR? That's pretty good. Usually it's around 10%. That's pretty good. Okay. So right now VR doesn't have eye tracking. I mean, you have to move your head to get scene changes. Eventually, everybody, Apple, Google, Facebook, Magic Leap, they're all going to put eye trackers in there, so they'll see where your eyes are. And then they can deliver content accordingly. So there's eye trackers that can figure out where your eyes are. We use that. There's a dot going around a circle on the screen, and we can measure your eye position compared to the target. Measure how well you're synchronizing, okay? Because you got to predict. Here's somebody who's a super athlete. We see that the picture of the eyes going around the circle. The one on the, here's the pointer here. This one here, this is a normal. You can see that as a person's going around, they've got very little jitter around the target. And we put a score on this, going this way and this way. Here's somebody with a concussion. Look what happens. You think they'd be slow. They're not. Their eyes jump ahead into the future. So it's very interesting how the brain's working. So you're actually synchronizing by breaking the future, okay? So here's my favorite thing. Breaking the future to be in the present. That's what you do. So you want to go 60 miles an hour, you think you just press down the gas and go 60 miles an hour. What happens is the brain press all the way down the gas, go 120, and use the brake to go 60. You get very good control that way. And that's why the brain weighs 2% of the body but takes 20% of the energy. It's full-on gas, uses the brake. The brakes are in the front part of the brain. When you get a concussion, they get whipped, they don't work, suddenly you jump ahead in the future. You swing your racket too early, the ball's not there yet. And that's the way a lot of people with concussion feel like. They feel like they're in the, they feel like, what happened? Nothing happened when I expected it. So here's, do we have time or not? Okay, let me see if I can get this. So here's a right eye and left eye following the target. You're going to get confused with my thing here, but you're following the red target. And you can see there's a normal person following it very well. Both eyes are following the red dot really well. Now here's somebody with a concussion, and what happens? Their eyes jump ahead. See that? They jump ahead to where the target's going to be. It's not there yet. So we measure this. So we've been using this. We started this off at Stanford football on the sidelines with, that's a DK2 Oculus. That's an older version. But we started off on the sidelines at Stanford games. Somebody had a concussion. We did eye tracking on them, showed efficacy, and then we moved on from there to now it's a part of the protocol. Now all the Pac-12 schools are using this technology for concussion assessment and follow-up. So here's somebody with a fast recovery. The football players actually recover very quickly because we exercise them. And we also see what kind of deficit that they have when we target that for therapy. So here's somebody recovering quickly. Here's somebody recovering a lot slower. And we can actually see certain parts of the visual area they have problems with in tracking. Here's somebody, this is an athlete recovering. Actually, it's probably one of the athletes that takes longer than normal. But here you can see the eyes jumping ahead. Here's our normal. They're way outside. Here's week 4. They start coming back in, less jumping ahead. Their scores are better. And then here's week 6, back in normal, green, no jumps ahead. You can see the progression as they get better over time. So they feel better. The headaches go away. They feel more synchronized. They can concentrate. So this is not just something theoretical. Your attention gets better. So this is what we're working on. BTEC is nationally with redefining concussion, getting away from just being a headache. And so we have these subtypes now. So vestibular ocular, this is the one where you're moving and trying to keep your eye on a target. Ocular motor is where you're watching a dot going around a circle or watching something move. Cognitive fatigue, migraines, anxiety, and mood. These are all the subtypes that we're going to categorize going forward. Associated conditions, sleep, just about everybody with a concussion has sleep problems. And cervical, neck whiplash can be a confounder. A lot of people with neck whiplash look a lot like concussion patients, but you have to isolate it and treat it separately from a concussion. So this is our board that we use for the Stanford athletes. We put them into each one of these categories, and then we assess them, and then we have targeted treatments to each problem. So in the clinic, we recommend cardio exercise right away. Okay, we haven't had a brain explode yet. So all the athletes get on a stationary bike. A lot of them have vestibular ocular problems, so if they're moving like this, they get dizzy and nauseous, so we'll put them on a stationary bike. Sleep is a real problem for a lot of people. They don't recover because they don't sleep well. They wake up very often. We educate the patient that they're going to recover, but they need to have physical therapy. And the physical therapy, a lot of it's vestibular, balance, eye movement training, and that's what we do here. So one of the things, the military has put a lot of funding into this. They actually put about $30 million in developing this technology. And they were concerned that somebody in a blast zone who hadn't slept would look a lot like somebody who had a concussion. So we took 100 soldiers in Boston and sleep deprived them. There's a place up there called Natick Army Base if you want to see soldiers tortured. They have freeze them, heat them, sleep deprive them, well, all sorts of things. Anyway, they have a place where you sleep deprive them. So here's 6 o'clock in the evening, a soldier, and then they keep them awake all night long, 6 o'clock in the morning, and you can see what happens is there's increased variance here, but they have no forward jumps into the future. So they are spatially, they have problems, not in timing. So actually most Stanford students look like this. So when the Stanford students go out, they all have this, I call it a top hat. It's kind of like they have this top hat look. They all sleep 3 or 4 hours a night. I keep on telling them, you got to sleep, because you know what happens. If you don't get enough sleep, you're going to get injured. A lot of these kids, who are athletes, go out there sleep deprived, and the injury rate's high. So getting enough sleep is really important. So brain performance. So we baseline test all the athletes, and we find that some of them have a problem. So here's a normal, really nice eye tracking. And then here's a baseball player, no concussion. But look over here. As he goes over here, he's jumping on this left side. So, if he's hitting a ball, he's going to have a lot of problems looking at it. So, we now we're putting in vision training into Stanford sports medicine to train up the athletes to improve their visual orientation. Here's a volleyball player, no concussion, but look down here, they're really poor. And then here's a baseball player, no concussion, but look over here. As he goes over here, he's jumping on this left side. So, if he's hitting a ball, he's going to have a lot of problems looking at it. So we now we're putting in vision training into Stanford sports medicine to train up the athletes to improve their visual orientation. Here's a volleyball player, no concussion, but look down here, they're really poor. So we've been playing up here all day long. They're very good playing volleyball because that's their attention up here. They're very good. When they get down here, try to play soccer, they're going to have a problem. So anyways, the eye tracking really, we see as an application lifelong. So you can see developing attention in children. We just published an article showing the signal in children, the developmental signal. And then we see ADHD on medication. The eye tracking does get better. Concussion, we use it. And then we can look at sleep deprivation, performance. And then we're doing a pilot study in the Alzheimer's group here, looking at pre-dementia, see if we can pick up a signal. So that's it. The product, all the Pac-12 schools will be using it this year. We're training all these schools. I think Utah was last week. And then the Golden State Warriors got it 2 months ago. They actually picked up a couple of concussions. They actually use it for performance now too. And the University of Texas, Notre Dame, the military, and so on, Mass General Hospital. So there we go. Any questions? Thanks for your attention. Yeah. With what? Yeah, so we see depression is not an early sign after concussion, but it can be longer. People who have had anxiety and depression before the injury tend to have it afterwards much more strongly. And so depression, anxiety, previous head injury are all risks, and migraine are all risks for prolonged recovery. So it's it's very common to see depression and anxiety. The way I look at it is if you can't orient to the outside world, you don't feel like yourself. And a lot of people who have a predisposition to getting depressed will get depressed, and also they're told not to exercise. So a lot of people use exercise as a way of combating depression. When they're told not to do that, that sort of makes it worse. But yes, depression is one of our subtypes, and we do monitor that very closely.
Can you speak to the recovery of repeated concussions?
Yeah, so we have a lot of athletes that have repeated concussions, and the question comes up, with a Stanford athlete, should they continue playing a contact sport? And the way I look at it is if they recover quickly, I let them go ahead and, I don't say they shouldn't play sports, because their attention orientation comes back to normal. If they take a month or two, and it starts interfering with their studies, then I will recommend them not to play contact sports, especially if they're having multiple concussions. They're just prone to injuries, and some of those people that just baseline eye tracking is really bad. And I've had a couple of them. We set them for intense training, and actually their orientation improves, and I put some people back in when they get back to normal. So for students, I tell them you're here to study first, and athletics is secondary. So if there's anything interfering with their studies, I usually advise them to stop playing contact sports and pay attention to studies.
So what's the range from the most minor concussion, and how long does that take, versus the most severe concussion?
Yeah, we haven't defined the condition, so it's hard to say what's mild and what's severe. Now with the CTE data, it's not only concussion, it's not only subconcussion, but now it's head hits without concussion. So you've gone from concussion, an undefined condition, to subconcussion, to now just head hits without the defined condition. So it's very undefined, lack of metrics. We need to really have metrics, and then from there move forward and do longitudinal studies. We have to do like a frame of heart study. We have to look at these people in the long term, look at people playing middle or school or high school football, follow them long term, see who gets a problem, who doesn't. It's going to be a long-term study. It's not going to be a solution overnight.
You mentioned in baseball.
Is this part of the panel? I don't want to get into the panel discussion. Oh, it's okay. All right. Yeah, sorry.
No problem. You had spoken about baseball players and their deficiency in eye tracking in the left side.
No, there's just one example.
Okay.
That's the old baseball player, so that's a problem. Maybe he could have been a lefty. Yeah. He didn't.
Have we understood the brain completely, like the eyes, heart, like this?
What?
Have we understood the brain completely as on today?
Yeah.
Like eyes, heart, like this?
No, the heart is still, as far as I'm concerned, a puzzle.
My question is, have we understood completely about the brain?
No, we don't. In fact, we're very knowledgeable about motor and sensory systems. So very, very knowledgeable about how you sense things, how you move, and all that. So we're not very good at how you think and memory. Those things are evolving. So no, we don't. I'd say we're far, far away from understanding how the brain really does work. Yeah.
Do you have things where the visual practice was better on the top of the circle, but on the bottom of the ball over there?
Yeah.
Do you think that was a consequence of her activity before or after?
I don't know. I think if you overtrain the circuit, we have water polo players like that too, by the way. They're very good up here, and then I'm not saying all of them, some of them. And if you talk to them, if you talk to people that have really poor eye tracking down there, you say, what happens if you're looking at the screen? You have to go and type. And they said they move their head like that, all the way down, so they can move the inferior field up, where they're really good. So a lot of people have strategies to work around it. I think that this is developmental. So I have people in the clinic too, keep on getting injured on a certain side, and they have. So an extreme form of that is neglect. Extreme forms, people have right parietal lesions, and they don't pay attention to the left side at all. It doesn't exist. So that's an extreme example. But we're picking up. These are really good athletes. Where they're really poor at one area. So the thinking is, and they've come in for an injury, the thinking is if you train them up and get them to pay attention to that area, they'll get less injuries. Especially the inferior field, because that's where you walk. You're not looking wasn't paying attention to a bump, you're going to trip over and so on. But I don't know whether this came from injuries, developmental, don't know. Yeah.
I see that eye tracking improves over time, and in terms of the sport, it's a decision of human. However, what is the current academic correlation between the things like how much you see the political individual symptoms that last up to 6 weeks or the 9 weeks? And when having to make decisions about what is the issue,
Yeah.
that the academic impact, how much is it?
Yeah, so we have a neuropsychologist in sports medicine. So if I hear from a student having trouble focusing, even after they finish their therapy, then we'll go to a neuropsychologist and they'll do. And that's one of our arms. So Dr. Yutzis does a lot of that. So we have a neuropsychologist, and she gives a test. If she feels they need more extensive testing, they'll go off and do that.
The time's wasted when you've got hard charges.
Let's talk. Talk.
I think that's our time. Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kajar. Our last speaker, Mr. Russell Siegelman, has spent over 20 years in business and technology as a manager, investor, and director. Currently, he's splitting his time between teaching, angel investing, and nonprofit activities. As a lecturer at Stanford Graduate School of Business, he teaches Startup Garage, Product Lounge, and starting and growing a social venture. In the social sector, he is the chairman of the board of the Global Innovation Fund, a $200 million impact investment fund that backs social entrepreneurs around the world that addresses developmental challenges through innovations that have been shown to work. He's also the donor of 1,800 bike helmets to new students here at Stanford to create change in the bicycle culture on campus by making wearing helmets the new norm. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Mr. Siegelman.
I prefer not to stand behind that, so I'm going to stand here. If you can hear me, put your hand up. Okay, great. Awesome. All right, so you might be wondering what kind of scientific information, as the guy who teaches at the business school, is going to tell you. Nothing. I'm here actually to talk to you about why my wife and I donated helmets to Stanford, and the background is sort of two themes in my life. So when I was 31 in 1993, I was an executive at Microsoft. My career was just taking off. And I was running a big, important project. I had worked with Bill Gates a bit. And I was sort of in the prime of my health, at least I thought. And one night I came home and I had a bit of a headache and it didn't go away. I thought, this is kind of weird. And of course, being a 30-year-old male, there was no way I was going to call a doctor. But my wife said, you really need to call a doctor. And it was probably a good idea because when I did, and I had an MRI done, it turned out I had something called an AVM, which you don't need to know what it is, but basically it's a brain hemorrhage. And why I had it, I don't know. It could have been a blow to the head, it could have been something as a result of a genetic problem. Nobody will probably ever know, but it's really bad, if you don't know this, to have blood in your brain. I mean, A, there's something going wrong, but B, it increases your brain pressure and all this stuff. I learned this obviously being a patient. So I was sort of admitted immediately into the hospital, which was dramatic as it was, partly because my wife was 8.5 months pregnant with our first child. So, I'm thinking, my world is changing pretty quickly here. I'm not going to work tomorrow, and the 600 people who work with me are wondering why. My wife's about to have a baby, and I'm stuck in a hospital bed. So I kind of negotiated with the doctor, and I said, you know what, I want you to stabilize me at least so that I can go back for the next 2 weeks, and so we can have a baby, and then we'll figure out later what's wrong. I'm like, I'm not sure about that, but we'll see how it goes. And so, they put me on some drugs and so forth, and I went to sleep. And, they came in the middle of the night to test me, it was getting worse. And I guess it's hard, maybe people who have concussions may realize this, but at least in my state, I did not realize that I was having any brain deficiency. But when they came and tested me, it was obvious to them, meaning the people in the hospital, that I was getting worse. And at 5 a.m. in the morning, they woke me up and rushed me in, and I had emergency brain surgery. At that point, I didn't have a choice. I survived. It was pretty traumatic, and I was in the hospital in the ICU for about 2 weeks. And it wasn't easy, especially since my wife was about to have a baby, our first child. But I guess I didn't, and I thought, well, woe is me when I was in the hospital, but I didn't actually realize how lucky I was until later. Because I had really minimal deficits after the surgery. Either I was lucky and or I had a good surgeon, probably both. But I had some issues with my speech because my lesion had been on the left side of my head where the language part of my brain is. And it turned out I had to go to language therapy. And that's when I began to realize how lucky I was. Because in speech therapy, I met a bunch of patients, people who had had motorcycle accidents, bicycle accidents, helmets, or I lived in Seattle at the time. Microsoft people that worked in the lumber industry that had trees that fell, their head was hung by a tree. And it was frightening. If you have not met people who have had severe brain injuries and survived, you don't realize how sad and horrible it can be. So I actually realized what a lucky person I was to have, emergency brain surgery. And frankly, look, I can talk, I can pretty much do everything I want. So I kind of left from that, and it took months for me to fully recover, but I did go back to work. We got a wonderful first child, and then a second. So I guess, in retrospect, it created a lasting sense for me that brains are very, very delicate and fragile items or parts of our body that we have to pay attention to. So I'll move the story forward. In '99, I moved down here with my wife. We got our second kid, and I became a really big biker. It's hard to be a big biker in Seattle because it's really wet. But here, it's what venture capitalists did, at least in the day. And so I was one of these guys that would ride, 6,000 miles a year on one of these super fast bikes up in the hills, and in packs of really fast bikers. But of course, since I had knee surgery, I always wore a helmet. And in fact, I have to be honest with you, any serious biker, and I know hundreds, maybe thousands of them now. I still ride with, in these giant 200-mile bike races with hundreds of people. Serious bikers would never be on a bike for a second without a helmet. Not even a second. It's like feeling like you're riding naked if you don't have a helmet. So we'll get to kind of how I think about you're riding around without a helmet, but to me they're riding naked. So anyway, I always rode with a helmet. I rode, just my right to tell you, for hours on end, at high speeds. And of course, one day coming down a giant grade at almost 30 miles an hour, I had a crash. And I have to tell you, this is another thing. I know students of the age that are here at Stanford they feel that, not only will they, if anything happened, they would avoid any serious injury, but frankly, nothing would ever happen, or they would know they could save themselves. I think I had that mentality a little bit too, until I crashed. It happens so fast, you don't even know what happened. I was sprawled out on the pavement. I could have been run over by a truck. Thankfully, he stopped and picked me up and took me to the hospital. But the thing that was most striking, I was in shock and had some broken bones and stuff, but my helmet survived. I should have brought it, I didn't. It had the whole left side of it. So a lot of people actually in bike accidents, I went over my handlebars because I got stung by a bee, whatever. Long story, but I went over my handlebars, and usually when it happens, people hit first with their collarbone, I had so many friends, biking friends, I broke the collarbone. I I hit head first, or almost simultaneously head, and showed up. The guy who picked me up saw that happen, and he told me that. My helmet, the left hand side of my helmet was almost completely cracked. And I doubt I could have survived that. So, those two things happened to me. I had brain surgery, emergency brain surgery, and I survived, and then I had a really vicious bike accident in which I'm pretty sure I would have had serious brain problem if I had not worn a helmet. So let's roll it forward again in my life. Then I became a lecturer over at Stanford Business School. I spent a lot of time on the campus here. And then it turns out our older son, who was the one who was born just after I had my first brain surgery, went to Stanford. He graduated after last year. And it just struck me how many super high potential people who need their brain, use their brain every day, are riding around this campus with no helmets, while they text, with heavy bags in their backpack, on broken bikes, in a really busy avenue. It just drove me, like, I could not believe it. And so, my wife and I have been talking about it, and I think on top of that, I sort of, I'm what's called a pre-major advisor, so I see a lot of freshmen, a lot of sophomores every year, and my son's friends came over, we always kind of met a lot of them. And so the net was, I kept asking a lot of freshmen and sophomores and undergrads, like, why are you not wearing pistol helmets here? Do you realize what can happen? I would tell them this kind of story. And the net of it was, I kind of thought, well, we need to do something to change the culture. It's not one thing. I don't want my hair to be messed up, or whatever it is, I've got a whole slew of things, but in my experience in the business world, the way you change behavior is to change culture. You don't convince one person, you get everybody to think, the way we have to change something, the way we have to change behavior is to get everybody to agree. It's like smoking, right? You look at people anymore, they smoke, certainly not in a building, but even outside, they're trying to get shut. Well, I wanted to change the culture here, my wife and I, so that I could not wear a helmet, kind of look down on it. So we decided to do an experiment to not make the helmet, whether you had one or not, an issue. So 2 years ago, we donated helmets, and there's still some left actually, hopefully I can get some at the end. We decided to make it, not having a helmet an issue. So we donated helmets to everybody, and it was kind of a cool design, like a football helmet, you've probably seen it. And we thought, that might encourage people, but the thing was really an experiment to see if in fact you could change the culture even a little bit to get people to wear helmets all the time. And I'm a little sad to say the result of that experiment was not positive. We did see some increase in helmet wearing at the beginning of the year, but as the president said, there was a rapid decline, and I still see some of those helmets kind of riding around campus, or I actually see a couple in my neighborhood in Palo Alto, believe it or not. But you certainly don't see most of them being worn, and you certainly see lots of people riding around without any helmet at all. So, that's my story, and I guess, maybe before I depart or leave people for questions, I want to do a little bit of a quiz. How many of you here ride bikes regularly? A lot of you, right? And how many of you, and look, I'm not comparing to a student here, so there's no bad answers here, but how many of you don't ride a helmet every time? And I don't care about most of the time, because if you don't wear it every time, it's that one time you're not, and you're a threat. So how many people wear a helmet every single time you ride? Yeah, not many, and that's pretty typical. So I guess my next question is, why not? Well, what are the top 5 reasons why people don't wear a helmet? Anybody wants to volunteer? Yeah?
What about people in Holland, in Amsterdam, that don't ride the bike with helmets?
Well, yeah, that's true, but I don't live there, and if I did, I'd probably be telling them they're just as crazy. What's that? Yeah. Well, look, you don't have to volunteer answers. I've heard many answers from undergraduates, but I think the thing I want to just leave you with is, I do think this is not an insurmountable problem. Culture can be changed. Like I said, it used to be that people would smoke in rooms and lots of other public places and non-public places. when people don't do that anymore. And I think there has to be will and recognition that this is a serious safety issue. And I think if we can recognize that and we can kind of get people to realize that and create some kind of sense of maybe social pressure or something that's going to change the culture. I don't know what it is. Free elements wasn't it, at least 1 year. But I think that's something I think we should all think about. And first of all, I want to also I think it's wonderful that Synapse is doing the work that they are. And I think it's super great that it's a student-led organization. And I think that's probably the way we have to go. Get more students, more involved, and create the kind of culture that says that riding without a helmet, even once, is not a safe thing. It's not a safe thing to do. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing your personal experiences and your ongoing support for bike safety initiatives. Before we proceed with our Living with a Brain Injury panel, where you will have the unique opportunity to hear a discussion about what it means to survive traumatic brain injury, we will have a 10-minute break. Grab some pizza, stick around. We'll be convening here in 10 minutes, and you really don't want to miss it. Thank you.
Alrighty, I hope you all enjoyed the pizza. So in 30 minutes after the panel is over, we will be having a lot of fun activities, so please stick around. We will be having a Feel a Brain workshop in the other room led by Stanford Brain Day, where you will have the opportunity to feel a real human brain. Don't worry, we'll give you gloves. That's on us. Also, there will be an opportunity to get free helmets and free bike lights in the back, sponsored by the Bike Safety Program here at Stanford. And we will also have free bike tune-ups and free maintenance workshops outside by the bike racks right over there. Wonderful. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. So this is our Living with Brain Injury panel, and we have invited 3 individuals with brain injury to come speak with us today. We have Mr. Brett Billington, Mrs. Emily King, and Mr. Kevin Suppical. And I'll let them begin and introduce themselves.
All right, so I'll let Brett introduce himself first, but before I wanted to ask a question similar to something my RA asked during my freshman year. So I want everyone who has a phone, a smartphone, to raise their hand. All right, and keep your hand raised. Of those who have a smartphone, if you have a case for your phone, keep your hand up. Yeah. Now, of those who have cases for your smartphone, keep your hand up if you wear a helmet when you bike. Okay, so I want to ask this because a freshman year RA of mine said this, and it really stuck with me, was if you can put a case on your phone, why can't you put a case on your brain? So, yeah.
Very good point.
All right, I'll let Brett introduce himself first then.
Oh, I'm going first? Yeah. Oh, hi, I'm Brett Billington. Yeah, so I ask that question whenever I see people biking in Palo Alto. I ask that question. I asked a dad in Town and Country Shopping Center one time with 3 girls. The dad had no helmet on. The 3 girls had helmets. And so I go to the dad. I go, do you have a cell phone? He goes, yeah. You have a case on it? Yes. Why? If I drop it, it saved $200. I go, but what happens if you crash and you're with these 3 girls? And what are they going to do if you crash and you're hurt? He goes, that is a great question. I never thought of it that way. Kevin gave me the idea to ask this question, so I do it as often as I can in Palo Alto. It's amazing. So my story is, I'll give you a longer version of my story. So a while ago, I had a heart issue, and I had to go see Dr. Fearon, who's got the best name for a doctor. He's a doctor at Stanford. He's Bill Fearon. He's a cardiologist. And he told me what I needed to do was I needed to exercise more. So I became a fanatic bicycle spinning class guy, like many of your parents, getting out of control, taking too many spinning classes. I was spinning so much, doing so many spinning classes, I go, I want to ride. So I did sort of what Russ did. I went and bought a really nice bike, and I started riding. And then I used to ride 3 to 4 times a week from Palo Alto to the coast and back. I'd go up Page Mill, I'd go up Old La Honda, I'd go up Kings Mountain, I'd go down the other side, I'd go over to Pescadero for lunch, and I'd ride back. So you have to climb the top of the hill. So after I rode about 7,500 miles, I go, I got to do a serious ride. And I didn't want to do a 100-miler or something like that. So I signed up. I met a guy who did the Trek Travels ride right across the United States, and I signed up for that ride. And the ride goes from Santa Barbara to Charleston, South Carolina. So I started that ride in October, late September, October of 2012. And I was successful in riding the bike across California, across Nevada, across New Mexico, and almost all the way across Oklahoma, and I crashed on the Oklahoma-Missouri border and had a really bad bicycle accident. Fortunately, I had two doctors who were on my ride. Tom Crummell, who's a doctor at Stanford, was on the ride, and there's a Dr. Dave from England was on my ride. They triaged me before a 911 vehicle came and picked me up and helicoptered me to Joplin, Missouri, where I had urgent care, and I had what's called a subdural hematoma. And so I cracked my skull. I was wearing a helmet. I fell off the front left side of the bike. We don't know what happened. The guy on my right saw me fall but didn't know why I fell. And the guy on my left was 200 yards ahead, so we couldn't see anything. So I just fell off the bike. I lost my balance somehow. I have a theory that I lost my balance with my foot popped out of its clips, and I just lost my balance and fell off. But I cracked my skull, broke 3 blood vessels, and had swelling. So what they do is they have to take you apart. So I was helicoptered to Joplin, Missouri, taken apart there, and then I was there for about 2 weeks, and then I was flown back to California and checked into Stanford Hospital. And Stanford Hospital put me back together, and I had this amazing doctor, a neurosurgeon here named Odette Harris, who's really spectacular. And so she put me back together. And so that happened 5 years ago, happened a little over 5 years ago, October 8, 2012. I haven't driven a car, and I haven't ridden a bike since then. I walk a lot, and I am really amazed when I see Stanford students not wearing helmets too, just like everybody else is. So far, that's what happened to me. I've had a really good recovery. The likelihood of success early on, I had a daughter who was a senior in high school at the time. She just graduated from Bowdoin last year, and I have a son who was a junior at UNC. He graduated. My kids, for some reason, went as far away from their parents as possible to go to college. I always say it's because their mother's so difficult, but my son disagrees with me. He says, "Dad, you're the difficult one." So it was hard on my kids and hard on my wife, but I've had a really remarkably good recovery, and I really attribute my recovery to 3 things. One time my wife was back seeing my daughter at Bowdoin, and I was left alone. And so for the first 9 months of when I got out of the hospital, I didn't have a full skull yet. Because when they operate on you, they take this part of your skull out. Because when you have swelling and they got to clean the blood out, they got to create space, right? And so that's how they do it with the head. They take it apart. And so I had to wear a helmet for a while and so forth, and it got better. But my wife was gone, so I wrote a note to my doctors, to Sherzad Lee and to Odette Harris, to talk to them what I think my recovery, because I've had a really spectacularly good recovery from a really bad accident. And I attribute it to sleep. And one of the things I did when I was in the rehab hospital, I had a doctor would come in every morning at 8:30 and go, "How'd you sleep last night?" I go, "I slept well." He goes, "You told me that yesterday. I'm not going to believe you tomorrow." He comes in the next day, he goes, "How'd you sleep last night?" I go, "I slept well." He goes, "Brett, you're in a hospital. They wake you up at all times of the night to see how well you're doing. There's all these people making noises," which there are a lot of people making noises. And I said, "My only problem is the guy in the room to the left watches religious TV, and the guy in the room to the right watches ESPN sports highlights. They're both into their different forms of religion, and these guys crank their TVs up in the hospitals too loud." And that was the main thing. But sleep was really important to me, and so I've slept 8 to 9 hours a night for about 3 to 4 years now, because sleep helps the brain recovery, and if you help the brain recover, it will do a better job of helping the body recover. To expect the brain and the body recover at the same time would be that it can multitask and pull that off. This doctor said might be expecting too much. He wanted me to maximize my opportunity by making sure my brain was healing right. And I couldn't do this when I first got to the hospital. I hit my right side of my head. I had left side body issues. Now I can do this pretty well. Sleep, communication was really important to me. So sharing my information, you never know where help's going to come from unless you share the information. So we have a blog that's out there you can find. If you just search my name on Google, you'll be able to see the whole thing. And I share on Facebook. I think a really amazing thing that people have today when they have these injuries is they do have things like LinkedIn and Facebook. So when you want to challenge your brain and see what's going on, if someone likes something I do on Facebook and I don't remember who they are, I can immediately look up their profile and find out who they are, either on Facebook itself or I can go to LinkedIn and kind of look up how I know this person. And it's really good in helping you reconstruct your issues with your brain and so forth. So communication is really good, and I do it since I don't drive. I walk a lot, and I run into all kinds of people. I ran into Beth and Russ yesterday while I walked around Palo Alto after getting a haircut. My wife said I should look good for this thing, so I had to get a haircut. So that's effectively, so communications is really important, and sharing information. I think a really good benefit to everyone today is they can use these really powerful tools. And the third thing I do is I metric myself. And one of the things they don't want you to do after a head injury, they're worried about anger management and depression issues. And I think if you set goals and so forth and metric yourself and you don't achieve those goals, you might be in a situation where you can trigger some anger management or depression issues. I didn't have any anger management or depression issues, fortunately, but I metric myself, and I metric myself by steps. And my goals are really conservative. My goal is only to do 6,000 steps a day, but I typically walk between 10 and 20,000 steps a day. So right now I did 10 miles yesterday and 10 miles the day before. That's 20,000 steps. Sleep 8. My goal is to sleep 8 to 9 hours a night. I really average about 9 hours a night of sleep, and I've been doing that for 3 to 4 years. I drink 8 glasses of water a day. And the other thing I do, which is really important for a brain injury, is I compare myself to things I do now to what I did before. So I'd go to conferences like the TED conference, or I'd go to things I've been doing for a long time in my life, or a lot of parties and so forth, and I go, did I go to this party? Did I mess something up? Did I say it the wrong way? What did I do? I metric myself to make things better. And so I'm probably going too long now. But metricing is key. And so because by metricing myself, I can hold myself accountable. In a complicated injury, between a head injury with mine was a bicycle accident, or it's a stroke, or it's another issue, oftentimes people want to hide from their injuries. I embrace mine fully. And I said, I've got this injury, I got to overcome it. And I openly share and talk about it. And if anyone wants to ask me any questions about any part of my accident or that I know of, because I don't have any memory from October 8th until the middle of November of 2012. But if you want to know anything I can openly talk about, I'm willing to share. And in the question and answer question after this, ask me away, or just grab me privately, and I'll be able to share whatever I can share.
Alrighty, thanks so much, Brett.
One other thing, I've been working with this group for a while because I've been a volunteer patient for Stanford Medical School classes for Shirazad Lee and Odette Harris. And Alyssa, who's right over here, the underachievers who started this group graduated from MIT and then created a program like this at MIT, and then they applied to medical school, and unfortunately, they could only get into Stanford. So both of them came to Stanford. They were at Stanford Medical School, and they started this program here. And she was one of the students in my class that I was teaching with, Shirazad Lee. And afterwards, she goes, Brett, I want you to come to our group we have. Twice a month, we have this group that meets, and I want you to come. And I said, why do you want me to come? She goes, you openly will talk about your accident recovery. And a lot of people, when they have head injuries, don't talk about it. And so you openly will talk about it. It's been wonderful working with her. Now she's out of Stanford Medical School, and everyone's trying to get her to go do stuff with them and go.
Alrighty, thanks, Brett. Sorry to interrupt. I think we have to move on to Emily.
Go.
Thanks. Yeah, Emily, do you want to introduce yourself?
Okay. Hello. Okay. All right. Hi, I'm Emily. In September of 2004, I fell off a 40-foot cliff in Isla Vista, Santa Barbara, and suffered a traumatic brain injury. I was going to start at UC Davis as a freshman, and so this was a huge transition in my life. And the accident changed everything. After a 6-month stay in the hospital where I had to relearn to walk, talk, and swallow since my whole left side was paralyzed, including the muscles in my neck. I came home to find that my life plans had changed, were turned upside down. All my friends were gone to college, and I had lost my independence. I was at home with my parents to just continue my rehabilitation, and I would never drive again since my occipital lobe was affected. Eventually, after continuing my rehabilitation at home, I was able to go back to school. First, I went to Foothill College and then Kaplan University, where I got my bachelor's in nutrition science. Still, I always felt like I was catching up with my peers who were who had established careers and were starting like eventually to make their own families. I would say socially it's been the hardest. I missed out on college life where you make friends, where you make lifelong friends. So I find
Thanks, Emily, for sharing that really powerful story.
I find.
Oh, yeah, continue, please.
So I find it like it's very isolating, and everything is harder with the brain injury. Finding friends, finding jobs, and finding a good relationship. There is no OkCupid for someone with a brain injury or someone with a disability.
Thanks, Emily.
And it was going to be a lot longer, like I was going to talk about like other stuff, but I cut it down to.
Thank you, Emily.
Sorry, like, I didn't want to be dramatic and
Yeah, I don't know if you guys know this, but Emily actually, if she looks familiar, she used to work in Wilbur Dining, actually. So if you're a student and she looks familiar, that's probably where you've seen her before. Alrighty. Kevin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Okay, so I'm actually a part of Synapse. I'm one of the core members of Synapse. And I was invited by Michael and Sani to speak here. And so I guess I'm sharing the student perspective, the student side of living with a brain injury. So I see some of my friends here. I invited some of you guys here, I guess, whether for free food or just to see me. But basically, if you're here, then you already know my story. But for those who aren't here, I am a sophomore at Stanford. But I started in fall 2015, which the math doesn't really add up. I should be a junior, right? So where did an extra year go? Basically, I took an unintentional gap year after my first quarter here because of a concussion from a bike accident. So it wasn't even a terribly bad bike accident. It was just your usual accidental bump and then run into one of those small pole things. Actually, it was going pretty fast, but it wasn't unusual for a bike accident. And so it wasn't so much the fact that I had a concussion that was bothering me, it was the fact that it wasn't going away. I had what's, I think it's called post-concussion syndrome, and it's most likely because I had concussions in high school from just being a hyper kid and being wrong place at the wrong time. During winter break, I was evaluating whether or not I should come back for winter quarter, and as much as I wanted to come back, I felt that I couldn't do academic work, and so I had to give it a no-go and take time off. And it was pretty hard. I dealt with concussion symptoms, namely migraine headaches, vestibular issues, and very noticeable brain fatigue. But the symptoms weren't the worst part of it. I think I really had a hard time accepting that things were different now. And I had to deal with the present as it was. I couldn't live in a world of ideals anymore, or maybe even chase the dreams I used to. But during the time off, I worked with a neuro rehab specialist and started discovering meditation. And I feel that helped me a lot, if not physically, then emotionally. I felt that I needed something, a drive, some kind of end goal, something I was striving for. And so after all that, I came back fall 2016 and started basically from scratch, from 2 classes. And they were easy classes too, for the most part. But I was struggling. I wasn't used to this. I was used to, bang, bang, just going through everything quickly. But I was going through 2 easy classes and just barely making it through. But I did make it through and passed, got credit for classes. And then next quarter, I tried a full course load, and it worked. And so to this day, I'm still doing a full course load. I'm still at Stanford. And hopefully, symptoms keep getting better, and I'll get to, I guess, maybe dream again. So yeah, anyways, so I guess I feel that I've grown as a person through all this. And it wasn't all for naught. It was okay. It turned out okay. And after coming back to college, I decided to join Synapse because I thought I wanted to pay it forward. I knew I wasn't the only one who was dealing with issues like this, and I just wanted to help people because I knew I could empathize. And I was hoping I could make some kind of contribution. So I'm still here, and thank you all for coming to, I guess, the conference. Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin. We're so lucky to have you in our group. And now we'll open it up for questions. So if you have questions for the panelists, please just raise your hand. Yep, right there.
Oh, yes. Oh, so the question was whether meditation helps and how I practice, how I go about during the day. Oh, where did I go for it? Oh, I guess I stayed at home for meditation, but it's because I have a teacher in Thailand who I contact with, and yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I was encouraged when I spent 85 days in the hospital, right? So I wanted to walk. I want to get them walk, and I said, "How much you want to walk?" And I'd say, "Well, I'd like to get out and maybe walk 500 to 800 steps or something like that." And they looked at me and said, "Don't set goals, because all of a sudden, if you set goals and you don't achieve those goals, it might trigger some anger management or depression issues you've got." And so be careful with the goals. So they wanted me to set conservative goals. That's why when I first started when I got to the hospital, I first walked. My goal for steps is only 6,000 steps a day, which is 3 miles a day. But I typically walk between 10 and 20,000 steps a day. Yep. Yep. There's one really quirky thing I want to say too, is there's one thing I don't do now. I had my bicycle accident when I was 59. I'm now 64. I used to bite my fingernails my entire life. I haven't bit my nails at all since my bike accident. Which is kind of, my neurologist thinks that's kind of odd, but it's like, but I never learned how to trim my nails. So now I go get a manicure every once in a while.
Thanks, Brett. Yeah, in the back there, Drake.
Oh, there's probably two. I mean, the best person to ask that question to is my wife, because my wife will say to me, like before I came to here today, she goes, "What are your deficiencies that you should talk about?" And I go, "Well, what do you think I should talk about?" Because I don't see them. I don't have any sense of them. But I think there's probably two things that I do that's a little different. One of it is that sometimes I'm quick. Sometimes I'm quick to make a assessment of something in a kind of a critical way. I think I've always been this way, but in a critical way that sometimes people find to be a little offensive. And sometimes I will share stories. When you're really open, when you have a really injury like I've had, and it's fully blogged, and I post stuff on Facebook, and I've really been open about it, I hear back from people amazing stories about their own healthcare issues or their friends' healthcare issues. And sometimes I'll tell people things, I'll summarize things I've learned in ways that some people find, boy, that's tough. And it's sometimes I need to learn how to pull back from sharing too much information because it's maybe not the right thing to do.
I remember, speaking of which, like, I had cravings for sweets before the accident, and that went down significantly after my brain injury. And I remember losing weight in like the first year or two after my brain injury. So that's pretty interesting, isn't it? Yeah. You're talking about biting your nails.
Yeah, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I met Brett that I had 3 brain injuries last year and freakish accidents. And I just want to applaud all of you for being out there. Emily, everyone wants to hug you and you're sweet. My biggest, I've battled back from a lot of things, broken bones. I fell 430 feet. And I feel blessed to be in as good a shape as I'm in, and alive for that matter.
Well, I'm on anti-seizure meds, so I often I yawn a lot, and I'm often tired, and I want to go to bed early. Yeah, I have a hard time staying up, and that's been since the beginning.
Hasn't gone away.
Yeah. So it's just a general sleepiness when it gets at 6 o'clock. Yep.
Alrighty. Any other questions from the audience?
No, if my accident would have occurred in California, I had minor seizures when I was in Joplin, Missouri. Nothing major, but minor seizures. If my accident would have occurred in California, it would have been reported to the DMV, and they would have suspended my license for 2 years. But since accident happened in Oklahoma, my urgent care took place in Joplin, Missouri. It was never reported to the Cal. So by choice, and also what I've tried to do is with my recovery, I want to make things easier on my son, my wife, and my daughter. And so I did everything. I tried to be as safe as possible and not take any risks that would make them nervous. Because it's bad enough when your dad almost dies, and then all of a sudden he pulls through it well. I don't need to make their lives any more worse than they really are. So I just should do the best I can going forward. So I just do the best I can. And walking is wonderful. I walked here today from my house, which is probably about 3 miles. I walked here, and I just do it. If I have to get somewhere, I just walk. Between walk, train, Lyft, and Uber, you can get around. And one of the funniest things I do is talking to some older people in my neighborhood, because you meet a lot of people, and Russ and Beth know because they see me walk around the neighborhood all the time. I'll talk to some of these people, they go, Brett, why do you walk so much? And I say, walk so much is good. They go, but don't you feel like you should be able to drive? I go, I can drive if I want to. I have a legitimate driver's license good until year 2019 or something like that. So I have a legitimate driver's license. It got automatically extended from the state of California because I've been such a good driver, because I haven't driven. But I tell these people, you don't need to drive. If you're 65 or 70, you don't need to drive. Between Lyft and Uber, it's probably cheaper for them to take those things than it is for them to drive. So.
Thanks, Brett. I think we have time for one more question. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I guess I can give a go at tackling that question. I guess so. As a student, I feel like I have to explain a lot. I have to explain very often that I'm limited in some ways, and it used to really bother me, especially in my first quarter or two back, because I felt like I was very different. I felt that I couldn't do things other people my age could do, and I just felt very different. I felt I was making excuses to people because most people don't understand what it's like to have brain fatigue or be limited or not able to do some activities because of vestibular issues. And so most people would sometimes I even had people be annoyed with being around me because I was limited. But I guess over time I grew numb to all that, and now I just kind of nonchalantly say, I can't do this, I have brain injury issues, is that chill? And they're like, yeah, sure, whatever. So yeah. Honestly, I feel like the general population is not very understanding, but the friends.
I agree. Not at all. And when you tell them I can't hold this because of you have mobility issues. I haven't been consistent enough about doing my hand exercises, and my left hand, I still don't have use of it. And so if I say I have to put down this bag because that's the way I'll have to reveal that I had a brain injury and I'm not the same as other people. And they'll right away be dang, I don't like this person. They'll be you're different. a lot of like boys, for example, they'll like choose another girl or be like disinterested because of that. And like, yeah, so yeah, you get written off right off the bat, like if you let people know that you're different and you've had brain injury. So that's my experience. For Kevin, it's completely invisible, I'd say, because for you it's more intellectual maybe. But I think people are very, in my experience, they're very discriminative, I think.
Yeah, I'll give you two perspectives on it. One is, I think, meeting people, I go hang out at Koopa Cafe a lot, and Pete's and Town and Country a lot, and randomly meet people. And often it's a great place to meet people who knew my kids, because my kids, and I'd meet parents I haven't seen in a while. But I find it really good for the brain to go meet people and new people and have conversations with them all the time. And I'd run into Alyssa hanging out at Pete's or at Koopa Cafe doing work on stuff, or even run into students who were in the classes that I'd work with Odette and so forth. That was really a good thing to do. But I think the bigger challenge, though, is when people spend too much time researching the injury on Google, and they meet with you, and they think they know the answer. I remember one time a couple came to see me. When I first got out of the hospital, the biggest complaint I got from people was, if people wanted to come see me, they had to schedule it through my wife. My wife's ability to be responsive to emails was not very good. Got a lot of complaints, so people got complaints. So I was meeting with people all the time. I had this couple meet with me, and I'm sitting on one couch in our house, and they're sitting on another couch, and she asked me this question. It was something like, Brett, you look much better than I thought you would look like. And I go, you just sat here, we haven't even started talking yet, and you've already given me a thing. I looked at her, I said, do me a favor, check everything you researched on Google at the door, and everything you read in the blog at the door. Let's have a conversation in half an hour, then make that assessment. Don't make that assessment before we've had a chance to talk. So the problem is too many people, I had some people say, we read the blog. I didn't write it, it was written by a friend of mine, a really good friend of mine. But they read the blog and they'd spend a half an hour on Google researching it and kind of going, oh my God, you're in bad shape. You might not make it. And they'd come and meet with me that way with that predetermined view. And I would tell people to check it at the door. This couple, one time, this woman looked at me and she goes, you're being really hard on me. And her husband looked at me and said, this is the Brett I know. He's direct, he's straightforward, he's not gonna mess around. I think what he's saying has some legitimacy to it. Let's sit down and talk to him for half an hour, and then let's figure it out. And as they're leaving the door, at the front door, she looks at me, she goes, thank you very much for course correcting me. I apologize to you for it. And I think you were in much better shape than I thought you were gonna be in. Thank you very much for meeting with us today. It was good. Overall, it was good, but it was like, but sometimes you just have to sort of course correct people because they think they know more, and particularly with brain injury. We got advice from this doctor, who's Jeff Manley, who's a doctor at Stanford Hospital, not Stanford, at UCSF. And he told my wife, the brain is where the heart was 50 years ago. If you think what they know about the heart today, they know, if you have a heart problem today, they know exactly how to manage and work with that. The brain is where the heart was 50 years. They don't know very much about it, so it's all evolving and changing. And that's really what happens. So people research this stuff they think they know, and it can be scary. And it's probably true with not only just brain injury, it's probably true with all kinds of injuries. When people have these predetermined views. Yeah, we have a question back here.
Well, I guess it just carries on with what you're saying. My neurologist said, I think there's very little known about the brain, so he goes, so corroborates that. Is that the case? Or, I mean, has there been much research done in the last 20 years?
Well, I think that what he told my wife was things will change as I'm going through all the stuff I'm going through, things will change. And he really encouraged my wife to find things that were important to her, to give her some distance from it so she didn't get so wrapped up in it that it became hard for her to watch me going through what I was going through and then see the changes that would sometimes come in the views of the doctors.
Alrighty, thank you so much. I think that's all the time we have, but it takes a lot of bravery for people to share their story like this, so let's give them a round of applause. Alrighty, so before you all get up, let me make a quick announcement. So the panelists will be up here if you have any questions for them about Synapse or about brain injury, their experience. We also have the Feel a Brain workshop in the back where you can touch a real human brain. Outside, we have the Stanford Bike Shop holding a maintenance workshop, and we have free bike tune-ups in the parking lot behind the Nitery. And we also have a demo of Dr. Gajar's iSync technology that's happening in the back room there as well. Thank you for coming. That went a little long, sorry. It's good discussion.